Hello, everyone. As we give a couple of minutes for the new joiners, I'll slowly go ahead and cover a few housekeeping items. But before, my name is Naz. I'll be the silent co-host today. Before we get going, I want to remind you that we are recording this session and we'll make the on-demand recording available and accessible to you after the webinar through our website, but we're also going to be uploading it on our YouTube channel. Next, would love to hear your questions. It's called an AMA after all. So if you're tuned in through LinkedIn, we'll be screening the questions there. If you're on Zoom, you can drop in your questions or insights through the Q&A tab at the bottom, or simply through the chat box. We'll try to address everything as the session goes after each section. So yeah, without any further delay, I'd like to pass it to our MC, Juan, to officially kick things off and present our exciting panelists. Over to you, Juan.
Thank you, Naz. Hi, everyone. My name is Juan Laura. I'm a Senior Technical Engagement Manager here with HackerOne. I'm very excited to give this webinar with you today called The Truth Behind the Hack, Elite Pentesters Tell All. Like Naz said, this is a live AMA, so if you do have any additional questions, please feel free to ask them. We'd love to cover them during this meeting. Good. So just a quick brief introduction. We're going to do just a little icebreaker here to start things off. So as I said, my name is Juan Laura. I'm Senior Technical Engagement Manager here with HackerOne. And the icebreaker question we have is, what would I do if I wasn't a hacker? Well, honestly, my answer is not that exciting. I've always loved video games. I've always loved board games, and I would honestly love to work at a board game shop. I think that'd be a lot of fun, being able to just kind of nerd out with everybody and talk about that. It's something that I absolutely love doing, so it'd be a lot of fun. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Peter.
Hey, Juan. Yep, Peter. And I'm doing a quick intro as well at this stage. So Peter Malarian, I'm a hacker pen tester on HackerOne and other platforms. I have been in security for about the past 2 years full time. Prior to that, I have about 20 years of experience as a software engineer and architect, applying that to security. And my dream career, I mean, I'm enjoying a career in security, but besides that, I'd love to run a garden shop. Both my wife and I really enjoy gardening, and it's very peaceful, nice to do something with your hands. I'll hand it off to Praneet next. Nice to meet y'all.
Hey, hi everyone. So my name is Praneet. I work as a security engineer with one of the Fortune 500 companies, and I'm also a bug bounty hunter. And my experience overall in cybersecurity is around 7 years. In that time, I've learned a lot about the offensive security operations like red teaming, application pen test, cloud pen test, IoT, and even attack surface management. And in free time, I like to work with different companies like HackerOne, Cobalt, and try to perform some pen tests and bug bounties. And going back to the initial question, so if I was not into cybersecurity or IT, I would be a physics nerd, since that is the thing I was firstly in love with before joining the computer science background. So yeah, I would be doing research in my free time somewhere in a cabin, without any human interaction.
Hello, everybody. My name is Irfan. I go with the handle Miko, and I've been in the security industry for the past decade, mostly doing pen testing, web, mobile, infrastructure, IoT, whatever that I can do and learn. What would I do if I wasn't a pen tester? I think I would have been a chef. I love cooking. I cook every day. Maybe I'll have my own food van at some point if this doesn't work out. And yeah, that's me.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that introduction. I love that Praneet set the bar really high, saying he'd be going back into physics while I'm going to own a game shop. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Alrighty, so we have 3 main categories that we're going to be covering during this AMA. The first one's going to be insights and experiences. We're also going to cover technical aspects of pen testing and industry trends and the future. And then we're also going to have an open Q&A. So as I said at the beginning, if you have any kind of questions or anything that you would like to have answered, please feel free to submit them. We'll try to get to them as many as we can. And let's move on to the first topic. Insights and experiences. So we have a couple different questions here that were asked. So the very first one that we have is, how did you get into pen testing? It always seemed like something that really cool kids are doing, but no one really talks about how to get into it. And I believe that one should go to, Oh, all panelists. So whoever wants to answer it, feel free.
I'm happy to get started on this one. So before I got into pen testing, I was an IT engineer. I worked for various companies providing IT support. And I think it was back in 2014 when the Sony hack happened. I don't know if people in this panel or the attendees know about that. But I remember following it on the news and thinking, wow, that's incredibly powerful. A group of people somewhere in a basement managed to affect a company that large and affect the world politics and cause a lot of drama. And that really captivated me. So once I had that interest in that particular field, I thought, okay, how can I maybe into that field, the cybersecurity field, and try to learn and further my career there. And after doing some research online, I found that most people said start with web hacking. So I did some Googling and I found Web Application Hackers Handbook, the manual, the field manual for every web application tester. And I went and bought that book and I sat down and read it front to back. And I couldn't make heads or tails of most of the bugs in there, but I think I learned one thing from that book, and it was a bug called open redirection, where you can redirect a victim to a different site. And on that very same night, when I finished the book, I came across the idea of bug hunting, and you can hack companies without getting sued and maybe even get rewarded financially. That was very exciting. So I sat down and looked around to see what companies I can legally hack, if that makes sense. And I found one, and my first bug, within a week of me finishing the Web Application Hackers Handbook, was open redirection. And that's how the whole domino started. From there on, I did more bug hunting, and then I got into security as a pen tester, and that's how the whole thing started for me.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. The thing that I remember about the Sony hack was having to change my password and also my credit card. But I was still not even aware of this industry. So I was one of those users that was just annoyed and didn't know the scale of what just happened.
For me, I'll just jump in. I think, Miko provided a really good background. For me, another really good way for folks to get into pen testing, web hacking, bug bounty is through capture the flag competitions. So also known as CTFs. So CTFs are kind of staged competitions that run worldwide, and there are various levels of difficulties. I think HackerOne also has a capture the flag site as well. And it's a great way to get started, to meet people in the industry, to go from kind of easy to very difficult challenges without much pressure. And one of the nice things about CTFs is a lot of times there will be answer keys and solutions posted online after the competition. So it's a great way to kind of get some real practice and then learn after the fact what you missed.
Awesome. Yeah, I've participated in a couple of CTFs and they're a lot of fun. Absolutely agree with you on that one. It's kind of a really easy, no real pressure way to get into the industry.
Yeah, so I'll go next. So I started hacking, I think around 2012. So back then there was not many resources, very less CTF challenges. So I was unfortunately a victim of Facebook malware attack, wherein I was trying to use some Facebook app and my account got infected, and I was posting some random malware links and everybody in my account started to get infected. And that basically grew my curiosity. And also in my computer science background, I was really not good of a developer. I enjoyed scripting. So in my university, I started writing some scripts, bash scripts, to hack into other systems using SSH, turn off every computer in the lab, and eventually hacking Wi-Fi. And things started to grow, and it was pretty organic. So I didn't have any idea about web application security or bug bounty. I started with network, Metasploit, Nmap, and then I slowly got my way into web application, joined an organization, did some research, initiated a lot of different services, red teaming, and slowly it naturally become a part of me. So that is how I got into hacking. So for all the new people who are trying to get into hacking, one thing is you can be self-motivated, try to learn in your spare time, and then if you can join some CTF like Peter and Juan mentioned, that is really a great benefit which I didn't have at that time. So yeah.
Excellent. The thing that I love about this is just how different everybody's journey has been. Really goes to show you that there's no real one way to do things. I myself got my start just because a buddy of mine was like, "Hey, you're getting laid off, right?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And he said, "Why don't you try doing, InfoSec?" And gave me a couple of resources. I took off from there, and I mean, now here I am, right? So the thing that I love about that is that it doesn't really matter how you get your start; it just matters that you want to go into it. Let's move on to the next question. What is the most important skill a penetration tester must have? Miko?
Yeah, I'd say the attitude to be a lifelong learner. The cybersecurity field evolves very fast. New techniques, bugs, methods of exploitation are developed quite quickly, and you should take the responsibility of educating yourself onto yourself and be a student of the industry, in my opinion. This process of learning and learning and learning never ends, and you should accept and prepare accordingly, because the knowledge in our industry gets stale quickly. New exploits, new methods are discovered, and if you don't keep yourself updated, you basically go out of fashion, if that makes sense. Your skills won't be able to pick up the latest and the greatest bugs. And initially, personally, I found it quite overwhelming, because there's a huge wall of learning where you have to go and learn quite a lot of different methods and techniques. And once you learn those, you think, oh my goodness, I have to keep studying every day, and that can be a little daunting. But if you put a system in place and say, you know what, once a month for one day, I'm going to bookmark all of the interesting articles I found and then go through them and try to maintain a rhythm and keep on top of that, you'd be a great pen tester, in my opinion. So yeah, the attitude of being a lifelong learner, in my opinion, is the most important skill to have.
Completely agree with that one, Miko. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't seem to realize, that once you come into this industry, you're never going to know enough, right? You're always going to need to be constantly learning, constantly evolving, constantly adapting. It's something that, if you love puzzles, this is definitely the industry for you. And let's move on to the third question. All right, we're going to start off with Miko, and then I'll hand it off to Peter. What's the difference in the way a pen tester and a bug bounty researcher work?
Right, so I can give you my perspective on maybe the most major differences I've seen between the two, because I've done both pen testing and bug hunting. The time and the scope, the time needed to do a pen test is quite sort of limited. You have maybe 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, maybe longer sometimes, depending on the size of the application. And then you have to try and focus on hacking that specific application only. You have to ignore the outside context if the client doesn't want you to investigate outside what is available within the scope. And more often than not, I found pen tests to be a mix of, obviously caring about the security posture of the app, but also for compliance reasons. That's sort of been my observation. However, when it comes to bug hunting, you have a lot more freedom. First of all, in terms of time, you get to spend as much time as you'd like on a particular feature that sort of bugs you. You try to, you have a guess as to maybe this particular feature could be vulnerable, but because you're in a pen test, you have a limit on time. You don't have the opportunity to go and spend too much time there, because otherwise you won't be able to cover the whole application. But in a bug bounty exercise, you get to spend as much time as you'd like to try and cover that area. So I can tell you from personal experience, some of the best bugs I've ever found were bugs I spent days on end reading the documentation and exploring the application at my leisure, and then sort of going back to the app, like, you know what, I think there's something there. I was right, and I could find something quite critical. So yeah, if I was to sum it up, it's really the time, and it's also the scope that's quite different between the two engagements.
Yep, I completely agree with Miko. I'll add to what he said. I think that they are typically solving similar but different problems. I think with a pen test, the thing that you definitely will get is you'll get more rigor in terms of most pen testers have a fairly formal checklist that they go through to make sure that they're covering the many different categories of vulnerabilities. And with bug bounty, typically, as Miko said, it's more open-ended. You can kind of go after what you like within the scope of the program. I will say the other major difference that I've observed in pen tests is typically pen tests, you will have more or deeper access to the application being tested than you would in an open bug bounty program. A lot of times with pen tests, you'll be testing internal applications, you'll be testing authenticated apps. Actually, in a recent pen test that I did for HackerOne, it was a white box pen test. We were given the source code of the application to audit, which you would very rarely find in bug bounty, except for open source type research. And so again, you're going to find that you, as a customer, or as a application under test, you'll get different results from these modes of testing. So I would say they're similar but complementary in some ways.
Time is definitely the determining factor there. I think a pen test has a finite amount of time, whereas as Miko said, a bug bounty you can muse on what you think might work and come back to it later, put a pin in it.
Yeah. Also, I would like to add one more point that Peter mentioned. So both are indirectly or directly approaching the same problem, that is securing the target application affected asset. The only reason you might go for a pen test over crowdsourced bug bounty is when you need a specific skill set. So some companies they won't go for bug bounty or crowdsourced pen test if they have a specific product. For example, if there is a hardware product and you need a specific skilled hackers, so it is best to go for a vendor who has the skill set.
Excellent. I think Peter wanted to address one of the questions that was asked already. Is it too late to get into bug bounty now?
Yeah, so I get this question all the time, and I'm sure Miko and Praneet do also. So the answer is it's never too late. For a lot of the reasons that we covered, that Miko covered very eloquently in the lifelong learning, right? So there's always new attack surfaces, there's always new techniques. I think that one of the challenges that people have, and getting into bug bounty and pen testing in particular is probably a subject for another webinar. But the first bug, so for me, the first bug that was accepted in bug bounty, I wasn't quite as lucky as Miko. Mine took me 3 months to get my first accepted bug. And I think that that's a really common misconception among people who want to get into this field, is that it's something that you can, jump in a weekend, you watch a YouTube video and suddenly you're finding bugs. There's a lot you have to learn as somebody coming into the field. And I would say, just if it's something you're interested in, have patience, focus on learning, focus on research, set your bar low, because as somebody coming in, you have a ton to get up to speed on, but you can do it. Don't give up.
And if I was to add to what Peter said, look, I've been on the hiring side of a company where I would hire new pen testers or help in the hiring process. And just the fact that you have bug bounty hunting experience on your CV, in my opinion, is quite valuable, because yeah, maybe from your perspective, you went and spent a month and tried to find bugs, but everything was duplicates. It's all right. What that proves is that you're good enough to find the bugs. You just wasn't the first person, or you just weren't the first person. And but that's still quite a valuable experience to have in compared to someone who maybe hasn't done this and maybe just straight out of uni, has the degree, but hasn't done much in sort of in terms of going out and facing real applications. So what I would say is do it no matter what, especially if you want to become a pen tester. Nowadays, even though I'm a pen tester full time, I still do bug hunting simply because whenever I find a new attack surface, I'll try to go back and see if I can find it on one of those sort of programs I used to look at during bug hunting. And more often than not, a lot of the new bugs do surface themselves on the old programs. So it's definitely worth doing. It's definitely something good to have, and it keeps you sharp, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think the trait that pen testers or bug bountiers or pretty much anyone in InfoSec has is just that tenacity, right? Like you said, it's not about being the first one to find it. It's about, okay, I found this bug. What did I do to find this bug? And just kind of being able to reproduce that and learn and grow from that. That's absolutely correct on that. Let's move on to the next slide. So this one's going to talk about the results and impacts. So we're just going to kind of go into detail on this a little bit. So the first question, this one's going to go towards you, Praneet. What are the pros and cons of using crowdsourced solutions to cybersecurity, such as BugCrowd and HackerOne, as opposed to more traditional solutions?
Yeah, so crowdsourced is, I'll just firstly explain to the audience how the crowdsourced and pen testing works. So in case of traditional pen test, you hire a vendor, you vet the vendor, see that the vendor has the specific skill set or the talent pool, and then you engage them for a scope. And every time the scope changes, the commercials for the pen test might change. If you want to add another web app, mobile app, it changes. So it is pretty much dynamic, and it can be sometimes pretty heavy on the pocket from the commercial's point of view. While in case of crowdsourced, you just need to contact the different vendors like HackerOne, BugCrowd, and once you have assigned the vendor, they'll get the talent pool, they'll assign the people. So there are a lot of hackers. So if you say that, hey, I want only the experienced hacker in my particular bug bounty program, so HackerOne or BugCrowd would vet the hackers with the specific metrics that they have, and based on that, they'll assign it. So the pros that I see in the crowdsources, you'll have the diverse set of skill set. It is also cost effective, and you can also cover broader scope. So for example, in certain bug bounty programs, if you have a ASN, or if you have a wildcard entry for domain, or you want to test, let's say, thousands of domain, it is easier to test it through crowdsourced. But also there are some limited controls, which means if somebody is trying to send multiple requests, those things need to be addressed. So those are few cons that I've observed in crowdsourced. But in case of traditional pen test, we have more of a tailored approach. We have more confidentiality. Like I've said, if you want to test application which is not out in public, or you want to make sure that this application data stays confidential, you can approach HackerOne's pentest team and get the pentest done for the application. And all the hackers that are being assigned in this particular format are vetted. They are going through a background verification, and then you can assure that you have the trust of all the hacker.
Just to add on top of what Pranit said, there's a sort of an experience from my end as a pen tester. There's a benefit here to doing crowdsourced testing, which I haven't considered until I've done it, and that's working with other experienced testers and seeing their perspective when attacking an application massively helps in improving my own methodology. Because at the end of the day, hacking is a creative business. You have to sit down and figure out, how can I break this, right? And you have to come up with novel ways to do it. And you can get set in your ways and think you're very creative and you can find bugs. But then when you work with others in a group, especially in a crowdsourced pen test, what you find is that, wow, for example, Peter or Pranit, they looked at the application from an entirely different angle, and they managed to find something I would have never considered. And that not only improves their pen testers, but also, more often than not, helps customers find bugs they haven't found in a traditional pen test. At least that's been my experience with crowdsourced pen testing.
Excellent. Thank you for that input. Let's move on to the second question. All right, Miko, what are your stories about the worst or best results from a pen test or red team exercise?
Oh boy, this one is okay. So I'll start with the worst one, and this one stuck in my head because of how. Okay, I'll just walk you through it, and you can decide for your own. I was working for a company that did red teaming exercises for a government-based entity that shall remain unnamed. Otherwise, they'll come after us, I suppose. Now, with red teaming, what happens is, one of the common techniques is you try to identify the clients who are in scope of the exercise, and then you try to send them emails, and through phishing techniques, you can try to lure them into clicking on a link. And if they do, you can try to get in. And if you do, then you go inside the network and then you try to exfiltrate data. Or if the goal is to go do lateral movement, you can move across the network and sort of get to a flag that the client asks you to try and get to. That's a sort of a high level, explanation around the red teaming exercise we were supposed to do. In the particular engagement that we did, the goal was to try and get into the network and get to a particular server. We achieved that. That was all good and well. And then we went and did a debrief with the client, and that was an in-person debrief. And during the debrief, once we explained to the client, who spends, let's just say, millions of pounds or tens of millions of dollars, I suppose, if you were to exchange that, on security, that the head of security who was in the meeting, he heard basically how we got in, which was through a simple email with a phishing link, and asked for a list of everyone, the names of everyone who clicked on the link. And it was rather unusual. We thought, you know, you would usually your IT team would ask that so they could train them. But he said, no, I want them now. And we asked why. He said, I want to fire each and every one of them. And I remember thinking to myself, that is the worst example of leadership I've ever seen, you know, in cybersecurity. And we tried to explain that that's not how it's done. You know, you should take these people, train them, teach them to do better. And people will always make mistakes. Even if you replace them, the new people will also probably click on links. But he kept insisting. And at that point, I remember just passing his request to the manager and basically explaining that this is what he wants. And I'm not going to do that, but it's up to you if you want to decide on that. So I don't know what happened at the end, but all I know is that that example and that kind of request really stuck with me as something not to do. You know, if you're ever the head of security, don't fire people. Just, you know, keep improving your techniques, your tools, and training your people. And in terms of the best bug I ever found, this one is rather amusing because I technically didn't find this one. So long story short, I was doing bug hunting on one of the largest financial organizations on the planet. Yeah, I can't really go into more detail than that. And the scope was massive and everything was in scope, all domains, all IP addresses. And as I was going through each and every one of the targets available, I remember finding a forum. And the forum was sort of explaining that it was built on a software called vBulletin. Now, for those of you who are into pen testing, probably already are smiling and know about vBulletin. But vBulletin, unfortunately, suffers from several critical issues. Now, I couldn't find the version of vBulletin when I was looking at the forum, but I thought, you know what? The website looks off, it might be vulnerable. I'm going to try and find the latest exploit against vBulletin and try to run it and see what happens. So I tried to run the exploit against the vBulletin on that particular website that was hosted internally within that financial organization. And lo and behold, it worked. It told me that it is vulnerable. As I tried to exploit the vulnerability to try and upload my shell in order to be able to gain command execution and compromise the server, just before I upload my file, I was able to see what sort of files already exist on the server. And I noticed somebody got there already like 2 years ago, set up shop, uploaded a shell, and fully compromised that server. So someone was there 2 years before I was. And this client didn't know. I reported it in the bug bounty program, and they were very nice about it. You know, they even rewarded me for it, even though technically someone else found the issue. But yeah, I thought
yeah,
that was...
that's the worst. I've had that exact same experience as well. That you get remote code execution on a server, you see that somebody else has already been there, and in my case, same thing. For quite some time, there was a full C2 server established. We had the ingress and egress points, and you say, oh man, good thing you got a pen test now. It would have been good if you did it 5 years ago when you were compromised.
And I can imagine the head of security of that company had one bad day, you know, because you have to come back to work on Monday explaining how someone got in 2 years ago. That must be quite a challenging explanation.
Yeah, that's definitely I'd say the bad side, right? Is like you whenever you get something really good, you know that you're ruining somebody else's day.
I'll say just one of the things under the best category, and I think probably all three of us have experienced this, is it's great. And I actually just had this experience on a recent pen test with HackerOne. It's great to have feedback from a customer saying, I've run pen tests for 4 or 5 years, and you found something, or your team found something that nobody has ever found, that we can prove has been there through every single one of those tests. And I think getting that feedback is really remarkable. And it's great for the whole team, the customer, the pen tests, the client-facing folks, to get that kind of feedback, because you know that you've really found something that customer will take away and have a much more secure product.
Yeah.
That's definitely one of the messages that's my favorite to deliver to the teams. Anytime I get that, I'm just giddy, excited to share that with you guys, because I know if I'm excited, I know how excited you guys would get. So yeah, 100% on that. And let's move on to the third question. So Peter, how can you communicate the importance of web application security to executives and board members?
Yeah, so this is tough. And this is, I think, something that comes with experience, both in terms of being mentored by more senior InfoSec folks, as well as kind of more practice communicating in business terms, because I think at heart, all of us are technologists, right? We all know how the bugs work. We all know how to find them, how the technical details work. And I think one of the things that, particularly with more junior pen testers, as well as folks in bug bounty, you have to realize that the people who are consuming your reports, yes, there are some technical folks, there are some security professionals, but by and large, these reports are going to go to people who are managers, who are executives, who don't have the deep technical experience that you do when writing these reports. So the technical details of how you did, what you did, super important for remediation purposes, but equally important is being able to explain what is the business impact of this vulnerability? What could an attacker do? How easy is it for an attacker to have an impact on the business? Because ultimately, being able to communicate the impact of a vulnerability, that's what's going to get it addressed. That's what's going to get kind of engineering dollars allocated to fixing those vulnerabilities. If you can explain to the business, here's what the issue is, here's what could happen if it were to be exploited, here's why you should prioritize fixing it. And it, it's something that comes with experience. It's something that comes with, being on a team with people who have done this before and learning from those folks.
Yeah.
But really good question.
Yeah, I would like to just add one thing that Peter said. So just combining both of the questions, like worst result in a red team exercise and communicating with the higher executives. So I have one experience wherein I was just intern at a company and I was doing internal red teaming. And at that time, I found Eternal Blue. This was back in 2017. And as usual, I got really excited. I was new kid around the block and I directly exploited the issue on the AD, and the AD was already tight on resources. So there was a blue screen of death on the AD. The entire organization's AD went down. And I remember all the employees just, leaving the desk, all getting grumpy since all the saved work that they have done got deleted because AD sync didn't work. And I was just sitting there cluelessly in guilt what to do. So one of my senior, he came to me and he asked me, what's going on. And once I gave him the Eternal Blue update, he told me that we have to immediately talk with the executives for the target company. So we escalated the issue on our consulting as well as on our client, and immediately got into a meeting, told them what went wrong. But the way he communicated it, it made a real difference, because if I was in his shoes, I wouldn't have the expertise to explain what went wrong, how it went wrong. But he sort of told him that, what are the different assets that could have been affected, or how internal attacker would have literally put down your domain servers. So that is the reason I was not fired from the job. So yeah, communication definitely makes a real difference.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably a skill that that doesn't get as much attention for pen testers, is having great communication skills and being able to address different audiences. Because as Peter said, right, some people you're going to interact with, they're going to be very technical. You're going to be able to get into the nitty-gritty with them, and some people are not. And having that skill to be able to talk to both kinds of people, I think would come in very handy in this industry. Right, now I believe we're going to be moving over to the open Q&A. So we wanted to address one of the questions right here live that came in. So it says, on the benefits of crowdsourced bug bounty versus pentest, wouldn't crowdsourced bug bounty be competitive, where hunters would be trying to be the first to get the bounty, and it won't be actually sharing useful info with the fellow hunters? Whereas in traditional pentest, its common goal and information sharing would be easier to achieve. Peter, do you want to take?
I'll take a crack at this one, and then I'm sure Praneet and Miko both have opinions on this too. So I would say the answer to this is yes and no. So obviously, if you're part of a pen test team, within the team, you're going to be collaborating, you're going to be sharing information, and so on and so forth. And that's again, a really great experience, especially if you have mixed skill sets, or as Miko said earlier, kind of mixed backgrounds on the team. With Bug Bounty, one of the things that I will say is, yes, a lot of what you do will be solo, but one of the things that I love about the Bug Bounty community is that there's a great community, right? There's Discord servers, there's Twitter/X, there's a lot of ways to actually make connections within the community and collaborate with others. And I've met a ton of people in the Bug Bounty community just from that. Say, hey, I'm working on this program. Anybody familiar with it? Do you want to collaborate on this issue that I found? And so I'd say, definitely, if you're interested in Bug Bounty, don't feel like you have to do it by yourself. There's a ton of people out there just like you that have the same questions you do, and are more than happy to help. So I don't know, I'll open it up for Pranit and Miko.
Thank you, Peter. No, I completely agree. When it comes to, I guess, the difference between the two, with bug hunting, when I did bug hunting, yes, it was mostly trying to get there first. But from a bug hunter's perspective, because the scope that I have is much wider, I get to do that. The practical problem we have with pentests is that pentests cost money. And if you were to include every single asset you have in scope of a pentest and have 5 people or 3 people look at it for a month or 2 or 3, that would absolutely blow the client's budget. So you have to make compromises when it comes to practicality and I suppose security engagements. Pentests have a place, and bug bounties have a place as well. What you have to do, in at least in my experience, what I've seen at work is you have an application that's developed. You do a pen test on that particular application to find all the low-hanging fruit, and then you push it to the outside world. And then when you have 2 apps or 3 apps or 4 apps and several assets online, because each asset works in its own quirky little way, and each one of them, once pushed live, might have a misconfiguration, what you do then, you use bug hunters and bug bounty methodologies to come along and find the cracks between the pieces of the puzzle, if that makes sense. And that's how you have a full coverage across your application. So I'd say, yes, in terms of sharing tools and techniques, we try to share that in a pen test. But when it comes to bug hunting, yes, it's more competitive, but they serve each other, and a good security posture should have both, in my experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think even Peter and Miko added a lot of points that were useful. But I would like to add one more thing, that in terms of, let's say, crowdsourced bug bounty or pen test, I would think if any organization has external assets and is okay with exposing them to bug hunters, they should definitely go for the crowdsourced approach. But if you want to go for depth first approach, or you want to share certain confidential information which you don't want any bug hunters to know, at that time, I think pen testing would make a lot more sense. So yeah, in both the cases, all the hackers are definitely sharing information. In certain cases, there are a lot of groups in terms of bug bounty hunters. Everyone collaborates. So yeah, definitely, they'll be sharing information in both the cases.
Yeah, completely agree with what you guys said. I think bug bountiers, it's more of a friendly competition than a straight kind of head-to-head competition. So whenever if they get staffed on a pen test together, there's no bad blood there, right? Like, it's all about friendly competition. It's similar to playing video games with your friends or doing things like that, right? Like, of course you want to win, of course you want to be the first, but you're not going to be upset if you're not. Yes, and then I have one question here. I'm going to provide a little bit of text for this as well, but I'll do it at the end. What can customers do to set their pen testers up for success?
Well, I can tell you, at least from my perspective, what not to do, and maybe if you do the opposite, you'll succeed. Why, in my experience, pen tests haven't gone the way we expected them to. First of all, communication. During a pen test, and before that, of course, I highly recommend having people who are assigned to that particular engagement to manage the engagement, work with the pen tester, provide him access, and maintain his access throughout the test. I can tell you, in my lifetime of doing pen tests, the engagements that went wrong were usually because someone requested a pen test and then they went on holiday. And then I kept trying to email people, asking for access, asking for credentials, and then, nothing. And the test starts already, and I have to call this guy and that guy and burn a couple of days before I can get access. Or when they provide you access, what they do is the application that you're given, even though it's on a staging environment, it's not an exact replica of what's in production. So what happens is you do testing on an application that is not the most recent version, and you don't find something major in there, but then their production gets hacked. And then once you go and do investigation, you figure out, oh, that the application you gave me wasn't exactly what was on production, and that's why a bug was found there. On top of that, I'd say, if I was to go back and look at one of the most recent experiences we had, is clients gave us access to live environments. And that's a big no-no, because if anything goes wrong there, that affects production, that affects users. So probably avoiding that would be a good idea.
One thing that I'll just kind of tie a bow on this one is to call back to what I said, time, right? Time is the most finite resource that pen testers have. So anything that could help that out, I think that's what the customers need to provide. Whether it's source code, whether it's documentation, whether, admin accounts, anything like that, anything that cuts down that barrier and it allows the time to be spent, usefully. I think that's the most important part, because an attacker has an infinite amount of time. They can bash their head against your app for as long as they want, whereas you only have a finite amount of time with these pen test teams. So yeah, setting them up for success, making sure they have all the access they need, that's the most important part. All right.
Juan deals with that a lot in our pen tests at HackerOne, and he's great at it.
Yeah, a little bit of experience on that. So yeah, very, very passionate about that topic. All right, moving on. Thanks for all the questions, by the way. Really appreciating all these questions you guys have asked. Having a lot of fun here. So moving on to the next slide, technical aspects of pen testing. So the first question we have here is, how much manual versus automated do you use in web pen test, Peter?
Yep. So I'll give my opinion, and then I think Praneet and Miko probably will have a different opinion. So I'm mostly manual, given my background and given kind of the results that I've seen from typical out-of-the-box automated scanning. Typically, if you're using something out of the box like a Nessus or an Acunetics or even Metasploit or something like that, you're likely going to find things that the customer is already aware of because they're running their own automated scans using the exact same tools. So typically, depending on the pen tester, people will still run these tools just so you establish that baseline. But for me and my experience, the real value of having a human pen tester is applying that human knowledge to the pen test, really digging in deep to the business functionality, digging in deep to obscure test cases that an automated tool isn't going to be able to intuit. And that's where at least in my experience, you find kind of the really impactful, hard to get bugs. I'm curious, Praneet and Miko, if you feel free to jump in on your experience.
Yeah, I think both are equally important from pen testing point of view, or even from the client's point of view. So as Peter already mentioned, customers mostly have their own tooling like Acunetics, Nessus, Nexpose, which they occasionally run. And the manual approach is something which is more important, I believe. So my approach is generally, I am a lazy coder. So I have a bash script with all the open source tool, which would basically scan for all the low hanging fruits. So using Nikto, Nuclei, and different open source tools. And then it would give me some low hanging fruits or some header information, which I'm too lazy to find out in perp. So I'll have that data in handy. And whenever I do manual pen test, I try to go through the documentation. So this part can't be automated, understanding the application, going through different workflows, going through different user roles. If the application is having cross-tenant access, you can check those kind of things. So in terms of manual, I'll mostly go for authorization issues, business logic issues, which are usually missed in the automated approach. And once you combine both of these, you can mostly have a better coverage.
Yeah, and just to add to what Peter and Praneet already mentioned, when I first began doing bug hunting, well, to me as a young bug hunter was quite expensive. So that forced me to learn on how to find bugs manually, you know, and sort of that reinforced the ability to go and look for bugs. And I practiced that for a couple of years before I could afford a burp license, you know. And for those who don't know, burp is sort of the standard tool we use for web testing. But as I sort of became a more trained penetration tester, I realized obviously tools are very important to run, but they have a place. What you do is, let's say you have a 5-day engagement. The standard approach I have is I spend the first 3 days, the first 3.5 days, just manual work, understanding the application, looking for bugs manually. And then I leave the tools at the very end, you know, just for a final coverage to make sure we use the tools to see if they find something I don't. But in reality, I try to basically find bugs almost entirely manually. And from a hiring perspective, if someone in the audience wants to become a pen tester, please realize that, you know, if you're in an interview with myself, I basically give you a free burp. And I'm like, you know, here's a web application and show me how you find bugs, because that is the difference between someone who's maybe junior and someone who's experienced, you know, the person who can find the bugs at least and do some exploitation manually versus someone who can rely on tools to do the job.
Awesome. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think there's a lot more manual work that goes into it than a lot of people really realize. Of course, automation is great, but you definitely need some of that in there. So I'm going to merge these next two questions that we have. Then we're going to cover one of the questions asked in the Q&A as well as part of this panel. So Miko, what are the most effective ways to report pen test results, and what's the significance of following a recognized methodology?
Yeah, so I can see there's two parts to this question, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. I'd say for the most effective way to report results, debriefs and facing customers, sitting down in front of them, having a meeting with them after a test is conducted is, in my opinion, the most effective way to communicate what's going on. Because you have to look at it from the client's perspective, as Peter eloquently mentioned. What they see, maybe head of security for company A, they receive a lot of reports from a lot of different teams, and to them everything looks red and everything looks on fire. You know, so you have to make a case around what you found, and in order to do that and help the team who requested a pen test acquire the right budget and sort of get the dollars behind it, if that makes sense, you have to work with them so they can sell what you produced to their own stakeholders. And I found that to be most effective when you have a meeting with the client. And unfortunately, in my experience, a lot of clients don't ask for debriefs. It's free, it's offered, please go for it. It's gonna help you make a good case, and it's gonna help you understand the pen test. It is so unfortunate to see so many pen tests go without any debrief. And it helps you establish a relationship with the pen testers, find out what worked, what didn't work, what you can do better. It's always there to use the debriefs, that is, and please do use them more often. You know, I can count on the number of my fingers, or number of fingers on my hand, how many debriefs I've done over the past 2 years, and there are not that many, unfortunately. And for the second part of the question, you mentioned why is it important to follow methodology in a penetration test? Well, look, we need to have a way to standardize and have consistency amongst the pen tests that we do. And that's why we have to have a methodology. You know, we should have a checklist that at a bare minimum every pen tester follows. If they want to go above and beyond that, that's great, but they have to be able to meet those minimums. And it also helps with comprehensive coverage. If you have a checklist in place, you know you covered all the areas that needed covering. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with flying. Pilots, you know, they have a checklist because it's very complicated to fly an airplane, and you can't really rely on someone just being good at a job. You have to make sure they follow along and have a checklist and make sure everything's all right. And there's also professional credibility. You know, using a recognized methodology demonstrates professionalism and adherence to industry best practices. And finally, there's legal and compliance aspects. In many cases, compliance with certain standards such as PCI DSS, such as HIPAA or HIPAA, I think, they all require penetration tests to be done to a specific standard. And that's why it's very important to have a methodology in place that is standard and industry recognized.
Definitely agree on there. Can you imagine boarding a flight and having the pilot say, "Yeah, I'm just going to wing it"?
Yeah, that would be quite the adventure.
So here we have a question that's kind of related to this. So what's your opinion on automation in general? thinking about automating the boring stuff or on automated pen tests and things like Pentest GPT for now, changes in the future. What's your opinion on that?
100% do it. And again, right, we're all people. So in my opinion, the best way to use automated tools is to augment the skills that a person brings to the table, right? So like Praneet said, you know, if you need to write a shell script to do something that you do every day on every pen test, do it. It's worth it. You know, I use ChatGPT all the time when I'm doing bug bounty or testing. You know, I could write, and actually I use it personally, and I'm curious, like, you know, Praneet and Miko, I use it to help write code, right? So if I need to write a tool, like a simple Python tool or something like that, sure, I could do it myself, you know, having the coding background, but I can go to ChatGPT and it'll get me a solution that's 90% of what I want in a minute. And then, you know, I've now saved myself an hour of writing boilerplate code, and then I can write the code that I actually wanted to focus on that brings value to the program or to the customer.
I completely agree with Peter. Yeah, it's you know, I've had several instances where a proof of concept for an exploit was out, but it wasn't exactly complete and it wouldn't let me compromise a particular server. And using ChatGPT 4 specifically, 3.5 terrible, you know, but 4 really works in helping me, you know, improve that particular code without me having to spend too much time of client's time, obviously, and produce something better for the client in terms of proof of concept.
Yeah, I think, you know, every hacker uses ChatGPT on day-to-day basis, but even in my case, I know my weak points. So for example, I'm weak at cryptography. I don't want to go through all the ciphers and, you know, learn everything again, but I know the basics, you know, how to exploit a particular cipher. So I'll just go to ChatGPT and try to use different ciphers or different session IDs that I find, and then try to decode it or try to analyze it. And another use that I have found is in one of the pen test, I was able to, there was an application which had an input for Python code. And once you run the code, it executes it on the backend on AWS Lambda. So this was a pretty secure application. All the modules like OS modules and other modules were restricted. You were not allowed to use anything. So I basically told the entire scenario to ChatGPT through prompt hacking and jailbreaking the ChatGPT, since it doesn't allow you by default. And then it was able to generate a Python code which was able to bypass the OS module and directly do OS command injection. So that was pretty cool because I've never used ChatGPT in this way. Yeah. And in terms of automating, yes, I think everybody should run some automated scripts for recon or low hanging fruits, but there would be a limit to it. Like, let's say for gray box assessment, uh, automated tools have some limited access to the application. It can't go and hack as a hacker, but I think eventually in future, even those issues would be solved for sure.
It reminds me, actually, and I'll be very brief one. I know probably short in time, but long story short, recently I was hacking or sort of doing a pen test for a bank here where I am, and the exercise was try to get through their defenses without being detected. And thanks to the power of ChatGPT, like I knew how to put together a bit of code that would act as a binary. I would run in the client's environment, but it would get detected by the antivirus. You know, with the power of ChatGPT, I could automate a lot of the ideas that I know on how to bypass antiviruses. And that saved a lot of time in basically crafting a payload that went over all of their defenses, including their state-of-the-art antivirus, and got us in very deep into their environment. So yeah, it's, if you can automate, do automate, but you obviously have to maintain it with the latest techniques all the time.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that input. All righty. I think Naz, we're moving on to industry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because maybe we can go maybe like 5-6 minutes longer, depending on what the audience will say. But yeah, there are just so many bug bounty related questions that I cannot allow this panel to prioritize. But maybe we can bring together another group just for bug bounty. But yeah, just wanted to say that. But yeah, let's move.
Excellent. Okay, so industry trends and the future. So first question, Praneet, what does the future of pen testing, ethical hacking look like? Where is the sector headed in the next few years?
Yeah. So in terms of pen testing, it really depends on the development teams. So if there is a new product or new technology that is coming out, we need, there is a requirement for security for that domain. So for example, blockchain was not very known in the recent years, like in 2010 when Bitcoin was first started. But recently there are so many projects on blockchain, the need for security has drastically, risen. So in this case, we as a pen tester always need to learn different things. So similar to blockchain, there are different domains like CI/CD security or AI ML or even cloud pen test or IoT pen test. So these are, I think, one of the upcoming domains inside of cybersecurity, which everybody should know of. So if 4 years back or 5 years back, if I could survive in the industry without learning about cloud or IoT, it is fine. But in terms of 2023 or 2024, if you know nothing about cloud, I don't think so you might survive in the upcoming years.
I think it's also important too, and I'm sure that you two have seen this as well, that the common vulnerability types change over time, right? So, in 5-10 years ago, you could very easily find SQL injection on any arbitrary test or program, right? Because the more sophisticated development frameworks hadn't come out that protect a lot of users from those types of vulnerabilities. And that's why OWASP, I think, has done a really good job of keeping their top 10 list up to date over the years to reflect the reality of the sorts of vulnerabilities that new applications encounter. And they're different. It's important to track that. I think also, and Praneet kind of hinted at this as well, I think that it's maybe a false sense of security that if you have a brand new application using all the latest technologies, that it will come out secure. It's inevitably there will be, humans are writing code, humans are writing the frameworks that you're building code on. There's bugs in that code. They're there to be found.
Yeah, completely agree there. All righty. Moving on to the next question. One of the hottest topics affecting cybersecurity deeply is Gen AI and ML. What is their impact on hacking, and can they be used for pen testing? Peter, Praneet, whoever wants to take this one.
Yeah, so I think we covered this a little bit earlier. I'm gonna hand this over to Praneet because I think he talked a little bit less on that subject, and then I'll jump in where needed.
Yeah, definitely. I'll just combine both of the questions. So the second question, that how can we use ML and AI in terms of hacking? We have already covered tools like Hacktrace GPT, Pentest GPT, and a lot of different source code scanning tools as well, which utilize AI and ML. So AI and ML is no stranger to the cybersecurity domain. It has been already used from the defensive side. Various EDR tools like Sophos, CrowdStrike, these tools are already using AI/ML. The only question is how we can utilize it better in pen test. And in terms of Gen AI hacking, there are a lot of companies, like all the top FANG group is coming up with their own AI/ML model. Like Amazon recently launched their Q. Google, I think yesterday launched Gemini, one of their project, and Facebook also has their open source Llama. So usually, if you want to get started with this, you should first know how you can deploy your own instance of these AI/ML tools. And then OAups has also done a great job on the top 10 for AI/ML. You can just go through it. So one of the easiest thing is just learn about prompt injection. And there are some more advanced topics that you'll need access to SageMaker or different tools in which you are poisoning the data for training. So the way AI and ML works is you first train the models based on the preset data. So let's say if you want to create a chatbot for trading, and you want to train it based on some financial data like quant trading or some optional trading. If, let's say, the data has been altered in some way, the AI/ML model will also react in a different way. So this is one of the example of poisoning the training data. So if you deploy your own instance, you can learn better about this.
And I would say too, the thing that's important about bringing these technologies and integrating them into the enterprise, integrating them into existing web applications and data sources is, ultimately these technologies are, as you know, they have their own classes of vulnerabilities, as Praneet mentioned, but they're also integrated with your other internal APIs and data sources. And you know, it's very, very common for vulnerabilities in those underlying APIs to be exposed through an ML or chatbot type interaction. One of my favorite hacks was a financial institution that had a chatbot, and I was able to exploit the underlying API and essentially take over all of their customer support channels that were run through the chatbot for individual users. So again, you know, it's just a reminder to say that you have these great technologies. Ultimately, they're part of a bigger ecosystem, and you need to make sure you're looking at the whole ecosystem and the security profile, not just, you know, each bespoke technology.
Yeah, just to add to what Peter and Pranit already mentioned, the discipline of AI hacking is here. Look, in our world of pen testing, you know, we have disciplines around web application hacking, mobile application hacking, infrastructure hacking, and now we have a whole new discipline that is specifically called AI hacking, and it has its own bugs that we can basically train ourselves on, and then try to discover them on clients' applications. Much like what Peter said, I actually did a recent pen test on an AI LLM application, and basically it had a vulnerability that would allow you to steal someone else's chat if you were to load an image. It's a little technical, but long story short, it is possible. And we are slowly starting to see this new wave of AI-based web applications that are coming along, and they have their own vectors and their own ways of getting hacked, if that makes sense, that are almost entirely different than a standard web application. You know, we don't use the same tools when it comes to doing prompt injection on an AI. We have to be creative, and we have to see what's possible and try to exploit them that way. So that goes back to the point I mentioned before around being a student to this industry. New waves of technologies come along, and you have to keep on learning and try to stay alive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we'll all be pretty happy to have just more of that to handle the kind of menial, mundane tasks and you know, help you free up. All right, let's move on to the next slide. I know we're running a little bit over on time, but we're gonna try to power through this last section.
And if you have questions, we're happy to still answer them. So please send those too.
Absolutely. All right, Praneet, what are the areas you observe that have an unmet and rising demand in pen testing?
Yeah, I think in recent years, the pen testing trend has really set off, but we are not shifting left enough in terms of security engineering rules. So I've observed that DevSecOps or continuous security is one of the domain that is mostly unmet demand. So if you are somebody who is interested in creating a career in this, you can start with learning about DevSecOps or CI/CD security. So that is one domain I can think of. Another would be blockchain or smart contract security. So if you are someone who can grasp the concept of different blockchains like Ethereum, Bitcoin, and try to audit a smart contract, even that would be a really handy skills, because even as a pen tester or even as a freelancer, we can work on various different projects and just review the code. It is similar to doing a source code review. Just keep in mind that you have to learn and grasp a lot of concept regarding the particular blockchain and go through a lot of research papers, how a particular uh, contract works or how a particular blockchain like Solana works compared to Bitcoin or Ethereum. And other thing would be automation and AI integration. So if you have observed, there are a lot of tools that are coming out of the GPT framework, but if you see there is no framework that is standalone or which can provide a complete solution, right from left side of security, pen testing, or one thing that can cover most of the parts of security. So that is one thing that I've observed, which has, you know, a lot of unmet demand.
Awesome. Thanks for that input. All right, second question. I think this is kind of related. What are the implications of Web 3.0 on hacking and pen testing? What are your observations? This
Well,
one's pretty neat. Anybody that wants to answer?
Yeah, well, I guess from my perspective at least, what is Web3? Well, Web3 talks about the incorporation of technologies such as the blockchain into the traditional web application environments. And are they worth learning and pen testing? The short answer is yes, absolutely. And if you want to be a well-rounded pen tester who wants to work in this industry, you should aim at acquiring that particular skill set. And you should also consider the fact that a lot of these new technologies have a tidal sort of progress to them. So, for a few years, blockchain is a big thing, and it sort of quiets down, and then AI becomes a big thing and it quiets down. And your job is to try to see those trends, learn them, so you're able to deliver them, and then over time they build momentum, and they become mainstream. At the moment, Web3 technologies are still niche. And, at least in my experience, I don't see them more than maybe once every few months. But over time, they become more valuable. And it's absolutely recommended to have it as a skill set to be ahead of the curve, both in obviously doing bug hunting and also helping clients keep their infrastructure secure.
Yeah, I think Miko has added a very important point. In short, you just have to ride the wave. So whatever trends are going on in the cybersecurity space or even in the development space, you just have to ride the wave. So today it would be Web 3.0, tomorrow it would be something else or ML. So best thing about this is you gain much more confidence and well-rounded knowledge, and you don't have to always think from monetary point of view. For example, if you learn more about bug bounty, you might have more monetary benefits like getting paid through HackerOne or different platforms. But in terms of Web3, you might think there are less opportunities, but still having the skill set would some way help you in future, where your knowledge would compound in future. So yeah, Peter, do you like to add anything?
No, I think you guys covered this. I mean, I guess the one thing that I would say is Web 3.0 isn't a cliff, right? There's plenty of web applications that are being built using traditional Web 2, and that will continue. You're not going to see the whole internet go to Web 3. I think there's a set of distributed applications that are appropriate for that kind of methodology, but there's plenty of work in traditional web applications as well.
Absolutely. And let's all remember that there's probably still some companies out there using Windows XP.
I saw a Windows CE host on a Pentest just recently, actually.
So there you go. All right, Peter, I think you want to take
Yeah,
us.
I wanted to cover, so from LinkedIn, we had similar question from Jose, who I hope is still with us, as well as Marty. General questions about how do you stay up to date on vulnerabilities and 0 days, when there's so much research going on. And that's a really good question, both from the pen tester side as well as from the customer side. So I'll try and answer it very quickly from both. From the customer side, you should absolutely be aware of the technologies that you have deployed in a public-facing environment and have some feed of CVEs either from the vendor or from MITRE, where you're aware as soon as a CVE is published on a technology that you're running, you're aware of it. Because I will say that threat actors are moving very, very quickly to reverse engineer these CVEs as soon as they're published. And if you are running vulnerable software, you should know that that will get exploited very, very quickly, within hours of a CVE being published. On the pen tester side, I think most of us are monitoring CVEs on a daily basis. There's lots of sites that do this. InfoSec Twitter /X is a good way to keep apprised of kind of the most critical ones. But again, the number of CVEs, I mean, if you look on a year-over-year basis, we're into almost 50,000 CVEs being issued just in 2023 alone. This is a trend that is increasing and not decreasing. And it's, as I said, the threat actors are monitoring these just like we are, and they're reversing these things as soon as they can.
Yeah, it's a constant battle. It's basically a race to see who wins out. So on the topic of AI, I have a question here from Nicholas Southern from LinkedIn. We know the discipline of AI hacking is here, What does this mean for the future of data exfiltration laws, and will international law be able to keep up with the progressively increasing speed that AI hacking has blurred all borders? Is the age of peace or the age of war? And how are we as ethical hackers supposed to interpret this?
What a great question. And I have to think about it. The short answer is, but I guess just based on what I've seen and where I think the industry is going, there will be a period where a lot of different companies will offer you free AI tools. The reason behind that is I think companies value data. The age of AI requires data to perform best. And the more data they have on you, the better they can perform and get the results to be more accurate for what you're asking for. So I think for a period, we will see a lot of different companies giving you free access to their AI platforms or very cheap access, so they can mine on your behaviors and what you need. And then after that, we're going to see sort of a shield, a lock on top of their data. And that's where I suppose, any kind of data becomes a lot more valuable at that stage. So just to, I guess, give you an example, let's take HackerOne. HackerOne has hundreds of thousands of pentesters, well, not pentesters, but rather bug hunters, and quite a large team of pentesters. And each one of us produces reports. Reports of findings on various web applications, mobile applications, and so on. If HackerOne was to get a model and then train the model on all of those reports, it can make a formidable tool around pen testing. So I think what we're going to see is a trend where you'll see a lot of people try to get all of that data and knowledge, and then build tools on top of that behaves a lot better.
Can I just respond to one aspect of that question that I think scares me every day? The question of, are we at peace or are we at war? And I think probably the two of you would agree, like, we're at war, right? I mean, if you look at the threat actors who are exploiting vulnerabilities on a massive scale today, they are nation states, they are criminals, they are motivated by causing financial or political or physical harm. And I think that is something that, if you compare to 5-10 years ago, I think the impact of successful attacks has gotten considerably worse. And, I think about that every day I come and do this job.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree with you there.
Also, I would like to one more thing. So in terms of security, you just have one question. So it is not the question that how secure are you? The question is how long are you secure? So it doesn't matter if you are a big organization or small organization, will eventually get hacked. So you just have to do continuous security. And also in terms of AI, I've observed a similar trend compared to the Web3. So a lot of companies are going on rapid development phase, wherein within 1 month or within 2 months, you can see a group of 5 individuals creating their own company in terms of AIML or blockchain and rapidly doing it. So what happens over here is the developer is not really aware of all the security things, since they want to initiate and start the business as soon as possible. And since technology is also growing, there is not many laws regarding how you can deploy AI. So similar to different laws like GDPR or HIPAA compliances, if we create more compliances for AI in future, I think that would definitely, help.
Excellent. I think we have time for one more question. What is an area of pen testing offensive security that is critical, but often overlooked in the industry or doing a pen test session? This one also came from LinkedIn from Colin. I'm not going to butcher your last name.
So I'll give a 1-sentence answer, which is security through obscurity is not security. So I recently actually had I guess it's a 2-sentence answer. I recently experienced this on 2 separate engagements where the customer had implemented, in both cases, a pretty sophisticated encryption or request signing mechanism. And once we were able to break it in both cases, we found a number of vulnerabilities. So on the surface, it looked very secure. Once you dug into it, it was not secure in the least. And I think a lot of times, going that extra mile really will pay off in terms of impact to the customer.
Yeah, I suppose just to add to what Peter said, always assume that someone's already in, and try to formulate and design your environment based on that assumption. Okay, if they're already inside my company, inside the premise, how far they can get. If they're in this room, how far they can get, and sort of design and compartmentalize your environment based on that, especially if you're on the defensive side.
Yeah, no, I agree with what everything you said. I think one of the things that it's not a matter of if you will be hacked, it's when, right? That's the thought you have to have moving forward, because in this day and age, it's until you become a target, you won't know just how secure you really are. Alrighty, so I think that's all the time we have. So first of all, I wanted to thank everybody for joining. We've had a lot of fun answering these questions. We hope this has been informative for you. And this will be available coming soon on YouTube. The recording will be made available as well. And yeah, if you guys have additional questions, please feel free to send them in to us. We're happy to keep answering them. But yeah, thanks again for all your time, and we hope you enjoyed this as much as we did.
Yes, thanks everyone for staying for 15, 16 more minutes. I know we had a fair bit of audience on LinkedIn side as well, but yeah, we'll try to get back to everything. And I want to personally thank everyone for the great insights. Yeah, seeing the interaction and contribution from the audience was really, really amazing. But yeah, any last words, final goodbyes from our panel?
No, I mean, again, I just wanted to echo what Naz said. These sorts of webinars are only as good as the questions that get asked. So we really appreciate the ongoing questions, and hopefully we got to unmask some of the mystery around pen testing.
Same here, and thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you very much for showing up. And we'd be happy to answer any questions. If you send us those questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. And we really enjoyed, answering all the questions. And as usual, if you have any questions, just let us know through Juan or HackerOne staff. We'll be happy to answer it.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.